To the cloud, I'll do. All right, thanks for joining us today. I'm Pamela Jackson. I'm the comic arts curator here at San Diego State University Library. I'm part of our Comics at SDSU initiative. And today I'm here with artist and professor Ryan Claytor from Michigan State University. Tell us about yourself, Ryan.
Hey, Pam. First of all, thank you so much for having me on here. It's great to be back because I'm an SDSU alum. So wanted to make that celebratory remark real quick. But yes, you're right. I'm a professor of comics studio courses at Michigan State University, and I'm also a comic artist in my own right. And I have a new book coming out, which I'm sure we'll be talking about here pretty soon, but you can find it at ahunterstale.com. So I've been making comics for almost 20 years. And when I was doing my graduate work at San Diego State University, I was using comics in my education and researching comics and autobiography in comics and writing about that. So I'm not sure where you want to start, if you want to start with a new book or take it in the Wayback Machine and talk about SDSU.
Well, we're on that.
Let's
go way back and talk about that since that's where we're at right now. So sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Tell us a little more about your time at SDSU and any observations you have there about what we did to help prepare you, what we could have done better, because as you know, we're really beefing up our efforts here on campus and creating a lot of new curriculums. So if there's things that you think would be helpful for us to know about your experience and what we could do better, that would be great to know as well.
Sure. So I launched into my graduate studies at SDSU in 2005. So it's been a little bit. I guess that's about 17 years. My gosh. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a little while. And I was so excited to see your email come through in my inbox talking about comics at SDSU and the initiative that you're behind. I attended your launch of the Comics Corner that's behind you. And I was extremely excited because when I was there, I think I mentioned to you that there wasn't a lot in the way of comics. There was a portion of the Special Collections Library, which was this like very well kept secret that there were comics in there, but it was a pretty slim collection, nothing like what is behind you right now. Right. So I knew about that, but as far as professors teaching comics or using comics in the curriculum, it was pretty slim pickings. I kind of had to find comics friendly professors instead of comics knowledgeable professors. So I worked with folks in the art department and the English departments, which, you know, kind of fits together in comics with words and pictures. And I graduated in 2007 with my Master of Fine Arts degree with an emphasis in multimedia, which when I went through, it was kind of like the catch-all emphasis for anything that wasn't a traditional art making practice. Like if you're not a painter or if you're not a ceramicist, come over here. You photographer, you digital artist, you comic book artist. This is a friendly place for the misfits of misfits.
It's the island of misfit toys.
Exactly. So I cobbled together a group of people, professors who were friendly to comics, and I ended up writing about autobiography and how that relates to the comics form. And in fact, I even started one of my longest books, Autobiographical Conversations, at SDSU. And it's a conversation between a former professor of mine and myself talking about that very issue, autobiography, the theory thereof, and how it relates to comics. So it's really this like comic book conversation about those topics. And I was unable to finish it there because it's 96 pages long. So my final semester at SDSU, I think I completed the first 16 pages, but then the professor I was working with, Dr. Harry Polkenhorn in the English department, was kind enough to work with me for literally years after I graduated. Wow.
That's awesome.
My then girlfriend, now wife, got a full-time teaching position at Michigan State University very shortly after I graduated. And so we moved out here to Michigan together in 2008. So I graduated in 2007, we moved out in 2008, and I started teaching a comic studio course here at Michigan State University, the very first course they ever allowed on the books for comics.
So you developed that.
That's right. So I am the coordinator of the comic art and graphic novel minor at Michigan State University, which if people are interested in, you can find it at tinyurl.com/MSU Comics Minor, and you can see all the requirements there. But I was one of the folks behind that and spearheaded that initiative. And I still teach all the comic studio courses here at Michigan State University. So I've been doing that since 2009 was my first class that I taught at MSU.
That's fantastic. Have you found that the students have really responded well to being able to have that minor? Like you just mentioned, there was nothing for you here at SDSU at the time. Is that a difference there?
So the students have responded extraordinarily well to the fact that there is, well, at the time there was a class available, and since then it's grown into a minor. But essentially, I was given a special topics class. They said, okay, well, so the story behind me and Michigan State University is kind of an odd one. I said my wife got the tenure track position here, and she tried to get me a partner hire while she was at it. But like I said, we were not married at the time. So they said, well, if you're not married, I'm not sure about the partner hire. So we'll give him one class for one semester. And that's it. So when
showed them.
Well, thankfully they allowed me to show them. So the only class I proposed was this comics class. I was so close to getting it on the books at a community college in San Diego. Actually, I was teaching at Cuyamaca Community College and also teaching at SDSU and a couple other places around town. So I had all that paperwork ready. And when they gave me that sweet one class deal, I said, okay, here's the one single solitary class that I'm interested in teaching. And they said, okay, go do that. And at that point, it over-enrolled, and it's been offered every semester since. And not just myself, but a number of professors on campus have been building on top of the comics curriculum here. And I'm not sure if you're aware, I'm guessing you are since you're a librarian, but I'll say this for the audience.
Yes,
Michigan State University is home to the largest public collection of comic books in the world, anywhere, ever. So we have well over 350,000 entries that are cataloged and ready for people to interact with. We have things all the way back to like Wonder Woman #1, Walt Disney Comics and Stories #1. You know, these are tens of thousands of dollars in a single comic book, and they are here to look through and peruse. You know, they're not slabbed in lucite so that you can never see them again. You can actually interact with them. And I want to give a lot of credit to Randy Scott, who is the comics bibliographer here. You know, he's been at this since the early 1970s, and he's still working today building this collection.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's really
it is amazing. Yeah, he is amazing, and his work is what I will often point to when I say, hey, let's do another comics thing on campus. You know, making these classes, making the minor, making the MSU Comics Forum, doing a podcast. I'm like, look, we have this world-class resource here on campus. We should be trumpeting this. We should be building upon this. Absolutely. And that's what we've been doing since I got here in 2008, 2009.
That's amazing. And it's a parallel path here. I think we started really collecting seriously in 2011. So I think you had already been gone after that and are around 100,000. So you put us to shame, but like what you say is so important, I think, because we do have these resources, and a lot of times you can't get your hands on those collectibles because they are so expensive, or like you say, they're slabbed, so you don't even get to look at the interior of it. And that really plays to the heart of why I think libraries play such an important role in comic studies at a university as well. So I love hearing all that, of course.
Yeah, well, you are preaching to the choir.
Thank you. So you mentioned your autobiographical interest, and I read somewhere you used the term autobiographical narratology, which I really love. I came from that background too, with English and doing personal narrative and everything. That was my focus. And I love exploring the power of personal and family histories through comics. And that, I guess, will lead into your new project. But why do you think that the comic arts medium is such a powerful tool for sharing personal histories and memoir, graphic memoir?
Sure. Well, comics is just such a powerful storytelling medium to begin with, because you can do anything in comics. You have words, you have pictures, and for some reason, for a long time, people have thought that the sum of these two parts are less than their parts, when in reality, you can do even more with the two of them together. And so I just think it's so interesting combining these and allowing those pictures to bounce off of one another, and allowing the reader to have this closure in their mind's eyes. They read from panel to panel when you're giving them enough information, or giving them just enough or not quite enough, so that they have to sort of interact with that reading more so than just sort of passively allowing something to wash over them, like a film or a television show or radio drama or something like that. So I really love the comics medium. I've been entrenched in it ever since I was single-digit years old, and just am thankful that I'm still able to be a part of this community and continue sharing new work. So yeah.
So fantastic. Tell us about your new project.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking about that. Yeah, my new project is actually, the script for it is a poem that was written by my late grandfather, Charles Kermit Claytor, and it's called A Hunter's Tale, and it's about these two seemingly disparate subjects, a hunter and his prey, who form this unlikely understanding of one another. And it's about themes of reciprocated empathy, which I think is so gosh darn important right now.
Sure.
Something that's just been sorely lacking in recent years, and especially, very recent times. I mean, we've all been through the past couple years together, and I don't have to go over all of it with you, from insurrection to George Floyd, and it's so easy for all of us just to defriend or not listen and keep ourselves in a place where we're only conversing with like people, and I think that's really dangerous. So this book really talks about reaching out and trying to understand perspectives outside of your own. Talk to people who are different from you, even if they have different perspectives. And it's a message that has been resonant for a long time. Like I've been reading this poem ever since I can remember, and it's just really stuck with me. And I also feel like I may be speaking out of turn here, because I'm not incredibly versed in poetry, but my outlook on poetry is that you read a poem and then you kind of have to reread it and decipher it and try to figure out what it's trying to say. But this poem from my grandfather is not like that. It's very narratively driven, and also very visual. I feel like I've been able to see this poem for a long time, but only recently have I become confident enough in my cartooning chops to take on a project that means this much to me. I really want to do my grandfather's words justice. So yeah, I've been working on it for the past 6 months. And I am doing a Kickstarter for it right now, which people can find at www.ahunterstale.com, and that'll take you straight to the Kickstarter campaign, which is live as of this release of this video.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So tell us about your grandfather.
Sure.
I saw if you want to share photos too of your Kickstarter, that's great. I saw on there your some pictures that you had, childhood pictures. So, and I love that his middle name was Kermit. I don't know, it's just so cool. Like,
totally, cool. I'm with you. So let me go ahead and share the Kickstarter page with you since you asked. So this is my grandfather and I back in 1985, so a couple years ago. And he led a really extraordinary life. When he was young, he was growing up in the Midwest in a little town called Alma, Illinois. And when he was a young man, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And from my understanding, in the early part of the 20th century, TB was essentially a death sentence. So they said, if you have any hope of living, you need to go out to the deserts of Arizona and hope that the dry climate will clear up your TB. And that's what he did. So he went out there, and because I'm here, I'm guessing you can surmise that he made it through. But during that time, he had to live off the land. So he had to catch his own food and, feed himself essentially. But that was not the only challenge, because while he had a 22 rifle with him, he could only take one shot in order to catch his food for the day. Because if he missed and took a second shot, the game warden would know where to look for him, because he was not supposed to be living out there, living off the land. So if he got brought in, the dry desert air would not be doing what it's supposed to. And, he probably would have died. So he got to be a really good shot. And I have never hunted before. I have no interest in hunting. I hope I never have to do that. But I also am aware that I live a very privileged life, that I don't have to do that. And I can go to a store and purchase meat or vegetables that have already been grown and processed for me by and large. And, but understanding his story really makes me think about, like, well, what if I were in his shoes? What if I were in that situation? What would I do? And I can only imagine that I would have done the same thing. I would have gotten over myself and tried to figure out how to survive. And he did. And
it's a matter of survival. Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that I'm here is testament to, his willpower to see that through. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah, he was also a railroad conductor and a poet, and just lived a really great life. I'm happy to be collaborating with him on this. I wish I could.
That's a sweet way of saying it, that you're collaborating with him. That's really cool. I've seen some other comics in recent years where someone has brought their family's history to life in a similar way, and it's so powerful to have that connection. Is this your first Kickstarter?
No, I have run a couple of crowdfunding campaigns before. Way back in ancient times, in 2013, I ran my first crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo, which is like sort of a second tier Kickstarter, but essentially they, at the time, had much lower fees than Kickstarter did. I think Kickstarter was around 9 or 10% that they took from your campaign, and Indiegogo was around the 4.5%. And so I thought, I'm going to be bringing my own crowd to this anyway. I did not think at the time that they were really going to push a ton of people my way. So I thought, well, why not save the money? But now I feel differently about those two platforms because now Indiegogo's fees are the same as Kickstarter's essentially. And Kickstarter has a much bigger brand recognition. And I think they do bring people to the table if you bring your own crowd. So obviously they're looking for campaigns that are doing well so that they can boost those and allow them to do even better, so that, Kickstarter is a business, they want to do better as well. So it's obvious that those are the campaigns they're going to put more people's eyes in front of. But yeah, so that was my first campaign, which funded Autobiographical Conversations, which was a project that I started at San Diego State University with
full circle.
Dr. Harry Polkenhorn. That's right. So,
awesome.
So Indiegogo helped me print 1,000 copies of Autobiographical Conversations. And if people are interested in taking a look at that, it's available on my website for purchase. And you'll see lots of San Diego State University monuments and buildings and public art pieces, because I've copiously photographed campus to draw all of that as Harry Polkenhorn, one of my advising professors, and I would walk around campus in the comic book. It was mainly recorded, a conversation that was transcribed, but there's only so many pages of sitting in an office that I can draw. So yeah, that was my first crowdfunding campaign. I've also helped my son, who was 7 years old at the time, launch his first comic on Kickstarter.
Oh, very cool.
And that was earlier in 2021 in March. He made his first comic book all of his own volition.
That's
And,
awesome.
people are like, oh, well, it's you, so of course he's doing it. But I'm like, I swear I was not pushing this. Like, I think he just sees me doing it and does it by osmosis. But
Yeah.
Anyway, he came to me and he said, Daddy, I want to sell my comic book. Can we go around the neighborhood and sell this? And at the time I said, we are in COVID times right now, so ordinarily I would love to help you do that, but it's just not safe right now.
Yeah.
But I've got an idea. We might be able to sell it online. And, our whole family started talking about this Kickstarter thing. And when we started that campaign, we thought, we'll print it out on our home printer and just staple it and send it out to like 10 or 20 people. Well over 300 people backed that campaign. We had, I think it was nearing $4,000 that my son got from his very first comic book. And at the end of the day, after we had printed the book, we did not print it on our home printer because we had 450
money to not do so. Yeah.
Right. And we printed 450 copies of my son's first comic book because of Kickstarter. And after that, printing fees, the shipping fees, the packaging and everything else, we socked away over $2,000 in my son's college fund because he made a comic book. So that was really an incredible ride that he took our family on, and we'll never forget that. So that was another one we did.
Oh, that's amazing. And such a formative experience for him, I'm sure, to have something like that just really sticks with you your whole life.
Yeah. I hope so. And just to wrap up your question, so I've done a couple already. This is my third, but I also help coach my students through Kickstarter campaigns. So in the before times, for my comic studio class, I was really adamant about having a professional development component to the class. So in the fundamentals class, traditionally, we would go to a local comic book store where my students would sign and sell what they made over the course of the semester. And for the advanced comics class, I would not hand them this signing on a silver platter anymore. I said, okay, now you know what's happening. Now it's your turn to contact a number of stores and let's put together, 2 or 3 or 4 store signings. And then you can call it a tour, and then it's a bigger deal. So then the advanced comic students will do an in-store signing tour for their book at the end of the semester. Then the pandemic hit and we had to figure something out. So we had these online events, and for the advanced comic students, I gave them an option of being coached through a Kickstarter campaign over the course of the semester. It's a ton of work in addition to making a comic, which is also a ton of work. So I make that optional. But one of my students who did that last year ended up making over $2,500 for her first comic book. And if I think back almost 20 years ago when I was making my first comic book, I was begging stores to carry my work and hoping they would carry it on consignment in the hopes that maybe I would get paid $1 or $2. But to have a windfall of $2,500 of cash for my first comic, I almost can't even imagine it. So I'm really happy that this platform is around and that there's a really incredible community around comics on Kickstarter. I mean, you look at people who have launched campaigns on Kickstarter and it'll say like 5 launched, 60 backed or 75 backed or 100 backed. Like they're not just going there to collect money, they're there to support people. And you go to other categories on Kickstarter, like, tech or something else, and they've launched one project and backed 0. And it's like, well, there's not really that community built up there. And it's not to disparage other categories on Kickstarter, but there is a definite community built up for comics on Kickstarter. And I'm so happy to be a part of that community.
It's really great. I mean, I love crowdfunding because so many more stories get to be told. So
amen. Yes.
So
many that publishers would not take a chance on. Yes.
Fantastic. So anything else you want to tell us about? Are there thoughts that you have on anything? Want to share your any pictures from your new book or the Kickstarter link again? Up to you.
Sure, I'd love to. I've got some pages here I can share with you.
Oh,
Let me
cool.
share that
Get a
screen
sneak
again.
preview, everyone. Sneak preview of what you can back as a fundraising campaign today, right?
Yes, as a matter of fact, they're on the campaign page. So I don't know how
Okay.
sneaky this peek is,
Oh yeah.
but
Well, we'll pretend it's a sneaky.
so if we scroll down here, so here is a mock-up of the book itself. And it's modestly sized at 4 1/8 by 5 1/4 inch tall. And I really wanted this reading experience to feel intimate, feel, because it's a very personal project to me. And I've also got some pages down here that I can share with you. We can go through.
I love
First,
that, the sizing, and that's something that interests me about comics is the book as a physical object in addition to the content, but looking at that. So whenever someone does something creative with sizing or cutouts on the front page, that always is something that's really fun to look at for me.
I'm a total format junkie also,
Yeah.
so I totally relate. Yeah. In fact, I was inspired to do this size because of another book. It's called Traditions by a Hmong American artist named Duachaka Her. And it was bundled with a Craig Thompson comic called Ginseng Roots, which I've got a subscription to right now and I'm really enjoying. And when I had this book, Traditions, in my hand and read through it, when I was done, I'm like, I love how this feels in my hands. It feels so personal. I want to make something just like this, and literally got out a ruler, 4 1/8 by 5 1/4, and called up my
Wow.
printer and said, "Hey, can we make something this size?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we can do that." So
Perfect.
in addition to that, I thought the smaller size kind of fit this project because it kind of echoes the size of like a poetry chapbook. They're
Mhm.
traditionally a little
Sure.
smaller, working with poetry here. So yeah, I'm just so happy to be sharing this new project with people and
Very
giving
cool.
my grandfather's work an extended life, probably a lot longer than he would have expected it to be around. So, here we are 40 years after he wrote this poem, and I think there's going to be some new eyes on it. So,
This is very nice.
yeah, I
The
really,
colors are
really,
beautiful.
oh, thank you so much, Pam. I really appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about this. And if people are interested in checking it out, once again, the website is www.ahunterstale.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. We look forward to getting a copy of this ourselves at San Diego State, and hopefully having you come be a guest speaker for us at some point, because everything you've talked about today is so on target for the things we're thinking about here. And I really love autobiography and sizing issues and all that. I think it would be really fascinating for our students to hear some of that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to come to San Diego State at some point. I have very fond memories of it, and met my wife in San Diego, and we still have family out in California, both my wife and I. So yeah, it'd be great to come out and see you. So
Cool.
I hope that happens.
Yeah,
And
me
thank
too.
you again
Thank
for
you.
having me on here today.
Yeah.